And we are live.
All right. Um, Welcome to the Southern Oregon Progressive Podcast. I'm Betsy Cunningham, the host and the founder of this weekly program that tries to every week get a topic that we're going to discuss in more detail, and then our randomness of what any of us thought was important that happened this week. And so I'm going to have our John, you want to introduce yourself, and
Sure.
then
Yeah,
Zach. All
I'm
right.
John. Yeah, I'm John Hunter. I'm president of Community Rights Douglas County, and I'm on the board of the Oregon Community Rights Network. And I'm a weekly participant here.
And I'm Zach. I'm also a weekly participant. I'm a graduate student in the history department at the University of Oregon, born and raised in Roseburg. And I'm also involved with community rights, Douglas County a bit, and the Institute for Social Ecology in Vermont. Always happy to be here.
Anybody else want to introduce themselves, or you want to
Max,
go on?
Max, introduce yourself.
I'm here. Hi, how's it going? My name's Max. I just woke up from a nap. Glad I'm up in time. But yeah, I'm a local Roseburgian resident. I'm gonna find a better spot to like sit and be a part of the conversation this time.
Mm.
Running for mayor, by the way. Still.
Importantly.
Okay. All right.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Lori Wick, and I'm a community builder and also running for commissioner, Douglas County Commissioner candidate.
All
Thanks for
right,
being here.
Zach, you want to introduce Allison, or
Sure. Well, I might just ask you to introduce yourself. How about it? Introduce yourself.
Okay, I'm Allison Whitworth. I'm a union uh, organizer leader. I've been an educator since 1989. I started teaching in Los Angeles, which is where I grew up. And I moved here in, let's see, 91 and have been an educator here in Douglas County since then. I worked 28 years in Glide. Mostly I taught kindergarten, first grade, but I also dabbled in second and fourth, fifth, and sixth. This is my fifth year at the Douglas ESD. I'm an instructional coach. So I serve teachers from Glendale all the way to North Douglas. Not just new teachers. I work with teachers who have been in practice for decades, and I go into their classrooms and help them with whatever they need. So in terms of union, I was a union member when I first started teaching in Los Angeles, and in Glide, I became a union member right away. I started becoming more involved in the union, becoming a representative for my building and part of the bargaining committee, part of the grievance representative, and then I was the president of our union for several years right before the pandemic. Once I went to the ESD, I quickly became involved as a representative, and now this is my second year as a co-president. I'm the other president. So because we're such a giant district or county, and we serve all of these areas, we have a contingent in Jackson County that's part of our organization. And so the other co-president is from Jackson County. And she and I work closely together, doing all kinds of things. We're starting a bargaining year, so we'll be bargaining in a month or so here. So we're gathering our bargaining committee, and so we do that kind of work, and then also represent educators and other employees if there's an issue with management. So that's me.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was initially the one who proposed bringing you on here. For those of you who've watched the program before, you've seen plenty of me. Allison's my mother, for context. And we've had a lot of conversations about education, about the condition of schools in Douglas County for most of my life. Um, and it occurred to me that of all the people in Douglas County who could speak on this and give a snapshot of what actually is going on in the field of state education in Douglas County right now, it's somebody who is well experienced with about 30 years in this county as a teacher, and who has seen a whole swath of schools on the inside across the county from north to south. Um, I wanted to ask, I wanted to start by asking you about your experience at Glide Elementary School, where you spent most of your career. 28 years is is a long span of time to get to know a single institution. So I wanted to ask, could you give us a snapshot of the last few decades from your perspective as a classroom teacher at Glide Elementary? Like, what kinds of new standards in the last few decades, new kinds of curricula have been introduced, the really major curriculum changes, systemic changes, and what has been developing over the last 30 years that is significant and maybe people in the community don't know so much about?
That's a big topic, a snapshot. We could talk for a month about this. But I would say one of the things when I think on my career as how I started and where things are now, when I started teaching kindergarten, that was my first experience, there was almost no curriculum. Children came in as they were maybe had some experience with letters and numbers, maybe they could hold a pencil. And there was nothing but me and my experience that brought what we were going to do throughout the school year. There were state standards. I knew that we had some guidelines to follow, but it was really what was appropriate for the children that walked in the door. By the end of the school year, you may be out of a class of 20, maybe you had 3 or 4 kids who were really readers by the end. But, the main idea behind first grade was that was the grade you taught reading. And that was from even before I was a teacher. One of my mother's friends was a first grade teacher, and she always said, "Oh my gosh, teaching first grade is the hardest because that's the grade they learn to read." And now that's no longer the grade they learn to read. Now you are expected that first grade is highly structured. Everybody has curriculum purchased and approved by the state that is focused on getting kids to read as quickly as possible. And not only that, there is now, I don't know if anybody's heard of, there's a movement called the science of reading. And really it's about repetition and phonemic awareness, all of these things where the philosophy is that a student has to have 300 exposures to something before they learn it. So you think about how exciting 300 exposures is going to be. And really, the push from the state has become, kindergarten used to always be like a growing year, a year where children learned to love school, learned how to be in a classroom. And now there's so many standards and so much regulation. They have just passed something where they are expecting all grades to do 3 state-approved tests during the school year. That means kindergarten through 12th grade, kids are going to be taking a test in the, the fall, in the mid-year, winter, and then again in the spring. And there's a lot of pushback against that. Right now, state testing is at third grade. It doesn't start till third grade. And I think they have to do like just math and language arts in third grade. Fourth grade, they added writing in, and fifth grade, they added science in. So now there's going to be state testing for 3 times a year. And that was only once a year.
Mhm.
So there's,
Liter
you have to
literacy is,
keep me on topic.
well,
What was the question again?
I want to talk about literacy more because some folks who've watched this program before and have heard my introduction know I'm a graduate student at the University of Oregon right now, and my job is working as a graduate employee, and so I'm grading. Some of my peers are teaching discussion sections, so I'm working with undergraduates at the university, and one of the key problems, catastrophes, crises that many across the country are observing and talking about in universities is an apparent decline of literacy, of students who are 18 or older coming into the university with horrible comprehension skills, who can barely write a sentence, who are, as a result, turning to programs like ChatGPT to machine generate answers to assignments. And something that I've been wondering is how is that being fostered in primary education and high school education? What is falling short at those lower levels?
Okay, so what I would say is that in the past, one of the goals was to teach the love of reading. And now it's about teaching the science of reading, teaching how to, as opposed to teaching to love. Like, why are we reading in the first place? So having that rich experience with just being read to as children, just having that, instead of saying, okay, well, how do we sound out this word? Let's just focus on that. And that's all we really care about right now. And you are a success if you can sound the word out as quickly as possible.
Mhm.
So I think that that a lot of the focus has become just learning how to decode. Yes, there's a huge push for comprehension, but if you haven't taught the love, you're not going to get to comprehension.
Mhm.
I'm going to tell a little story about you, Zach. So when Zach started kindergarten, he was already a reader. He was a reader when he was 3. And to succeed at I think by that time, and I can't remember the year, but that was like, I think like 2001, 2002, something like that. There was already that push to like really hit phonics hard, and they wanted to time him. And that was part of the success, is being timed as a reader. And so I remember that Zach didn't get like, I mean, he was one of the only kids that could read, but his reading was slow because he was reading with expression. He was reading with the pause and the little bear, and all of this, and how that was not the value. The value was, how quick can you get those words out of your mouth? And so the push for speed and fluency really was the detriment of that comprehension and that love piece. Um, what was the question again, Zach? Let me circle back to what you were talking about.
Well, what's happening in terms of literacy in the elementary schools right now? That is seeming to be leaving 18-year-olds with no no serious reading comprehension or writing ability?
I don't really know the answer to that. I
Mhm.
think part of it is moving away from literature and moving towards short pieces. I know that it's very common that, you've got an anthology, that's the program that the district buys is an anthology, and you're not reading lots of novels to like really get that love and wanting to read more and more. You're reading a small section so that you can show that you know how to glean if it's a nonfiction section, you can glean the important information to then synthesize that and let somebody know what it means. So you're going back and you're just looking through text as opposed to really doing that deep dive into literature that probably maybe not Max, but a lot of the rest of us did when we were in high school, where we were, reading Moby Dick and all of the, Shakespeare and those types of things where we would just sit in class and process all of that.
Mhm.
Um, so I think that that's part of what's being lost. Um, And then as for, obviously Chat GPT is a thorn in our side. But it's also a tool that, you can't really get away from. I use it myself in my job. And I think when I talk to other people who use it not successfully and those who use it successfully, there's a level of what you put in terms of thought and research and questioning that then gives you something that's useful, and you have to know something to get something, if that makes sense. um, and I do think that there is a way around using AI in the classroom by having pencil and pen pencil and paper assignments that you do present, in the classroom itself, as opposed to like going home and pulling up your computer. The other thing I'll say about the shift is that we have shifted so much to online and tech components. Any component that any curriculum that you're looking at has this heavy weight on online stuff. So we have kids that are online at home, and then they come to school, and a lot of what they're doing is also online. And I think you really miss that connection with the printed page and the connection with with communicating with your peers when you have that so much of that tech component in the classroom.
Mhm.
So recently there's been data that over 50% of Americans cannot read above a sixth grade level. Okay, was a major story, what, a year and a half, 2 years ago. Um, I have not been in the field of education for decades. I was actually the literacy coordinator in the 1990s for Umpqua Community College when they
Oh,
had a
nice.
part, when they had a partnership with Project Literacy, and the debate there, and we did a lot of development stuff because there was displaced timber workers, the whole idea of how people transition as adults. When in a community like this, there's a good number of people who didn't go past the ninth grade, right? Because there's good paying jobs. Actually, the best paying jobs when I got here in the 1990s was, all in all, probably working in the timber industry, right? Whether you had a degree, you didn't have to have a degree, and it was, easy enough to get there as long as you were, willing to work hard enough. So what we were talking about, and this was actually the whole thing that it had taken the K through 12 system by the late 1990s, which was portfolio assessment, with the whole idea and a lot of the development stuff we had about the psychosocial, how people learn, right? How that process happens. And actually for adults, we were part of the Laubach method, which was a phonics based one-on-one tutor training system that was used. But we also used all the curricula for the adult basic education through the community college. So there was kind of a mix of that stuff. But one of the concerns that I have is, and I was actually as a Vista volunteer originally before I was the coordinator, came in to do a family literacy project. So what I did is went to various schools in the community, primarily working with the Roseburg School District. They had the baby books, right? You know, the baby book program at the hospital. I was part of the team that kind of helped got that going. The Roseburg School District actually funded it. And so the big struggle that I saw were these adults who are in adult basic education and the impact that their lack of literacy skills then, which most of the people in my program actually probably had below a sixth grade reading level when they started the program, or they would have been in one of the higher developmental, education programs. And so what you say to me is actually shocking, because I still don't believe that testing is the best way to test literacy skills. And literacy needs to be critical oriented, not just around the love of reading, but the ability to critically think. And I think, and in our, we had a program we had tutors that helped kids, but we primarily focused on the parents, how to teach the parents how to help their kids learn to read, and not sit down and make them read, but love to read, right? Finding that, what does this kid like to know about? Let's put that contextual issue into and helping them create a love of reading to get the information. It sounds like that has changed, that is no, even the critical thinking, which is most scary to me. Because I think that's part of the problem we see about what's happening to our society, that lack of, critical thinking, particularly in podcasts.
So I would say that most curriculum does focus also on critical thinking, on comprehension. It's not just all about phonics, but there is that huge push for phonics. When you think about the classroom day across the county, we have kids who are, maybe they're in school for whatever it is, 6 hours. Some of that is, recess and lunch and all of that. And they have an hour and a half to 2 hours of reading instruction. They have an hour and a half of math instruction. They have those kids who are struggling have extra time in that instruction. There's almost zero time for kids to do, they have their specials, they have PE, they have music, but there's almost zero time to do science and social studies and art in the classroom. It's almost unheard of. So having that push, I really wonder about our, because there isn't a lot of push for social emotional, even though we talked a lot about it after COVID. I don't know if you've looked at the recent data that came out that really shows that where Douglas County was pre-COVID, we're still about 10 percentage points below that level 5 years after COVID. And the philosophy right now is that we're not doing enough, that we need to change how we're teaching, that we need to spend more time doing core academics, when that's not really what changed pre-pandemic and post-pandemic. We didn't suddenly just stop learning how to teach. We didn't suddenly stop teaching phonics and math skills. So there's something else that happened during the pandemic that is making it so that the students are not where they need to be. And I'm talking about even students that were not disrupted. Their education was not disrupted by the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
They were not in school. They're third graders, right? They were 3 and 4 years old when the pandemic hit at home. and across Douglas County, we don't have a lot of the percentage of kids that's in, and I don't know what it is, but it's not, the percentage of kids in preschool is not a huge percentage of kids. So they really were just home with their families. So why is it that our kids are still 10% in the math and language arts assessments than pre-pandemic? I don't know the answer. I mean, I have some theories, but I don't really know the answer to that.
Well, what kind of theories do you have?
I think since the pandemic, we as educators and from the state, what everybody has told us is that we need to catch kids up. So we need to make up for the loss, because when they came back after the pandemic, scores were significantly lower, 20% lower, perhaps. And so there was this big panic to like get kids back in line, get them back to where, to learning and back to where they needed to be. And so there was a huge push for academics. So that really cut out. I think at the very beginning, we were like saying, okay, well, we need to deal with social emotional stuff, but that is gone. Now we are just not even, it's the rare school that is giving a good amount of time to like letting kids be kids. And we're really pushing younger and younger, even pre-K. You've got kids who are sitting and learning their letters and numbers and sounds and all of that. And kids who come into kindergarten not knowing how to write their name are immediately like red flag, like, oh my gosh, we've got to do some extra learning for this kid. And so that kid does, if the class gets to have choice time, that's when that kid gets pulled out to do extra letters. So,
Mhm.
so why do I think it's happening? I think part of what's happening is that we have we're sucking the joy out of school. And so kids are not excited to be there. Attendance is at an all-time low. And that happened from the pandemic. So attendance is worse. Behaviors are astronomical in the classroom. I've been in plenty of schools across the county where kids come in and we are learning right away. So if you have a kid that is struggling with ADHD or something like that, some kind of other issue, they immediately they're inserted into a situation where already they're not successful from the minute they walk in the classroom.
So how do you see this development over the years, and especially since 2020, of a greater regimentation of classroom activities? How do you see that affecting the relationship of students to each other, as well as to teachers?
So I work with a lot of new teachers, and in our county, we have more teachers that don't even have a bachelor's degree than most other counties in the state of Oregon. So that means teachers who are on an emergency credential and who are teaching during the day and going to school in the evening, trying to get their bachelor's degree and then trying to get their state license. And I see that pressure of having to get through lesson 1.1 by, X amount of time, and having to get through unit in math. I see a lot of pressure on those teachers that they feel like they can't take the time and they don't have the training to recognize, oh, this is not developmentally appropriate, or this, we need to shift and do some, we need to like, do a crazy dance in our classroom or take a break. Because there's this pressure to get through curriculum because that's what is, that's the philosophy behind getting kids to where they need to be in terms of the state standard. So I think the relationship between teachers and students, I think teachers are under extra pressure, and that one of the things that we talk about is, I'm teaching math. No, you're not. You're teaching children. And yeah, I talk a lot with newer teachers about how behavior is something that also needs to be taught in school. Like you can't just say, we didn't get to our curriculum today because, there was a problem out at recess and I had to spend half an hour debriefing with kids. That's super valuable too, but there's so much pressure. I mean, the number of first and second year teachers that give up the profession is staggering. I think it's like, I can't pull the statistic out, but it's, teachers are very likely to quit within their first 3 to 5 years. And I'm working with teachers who don't even have a credential yet, who have already given up and they are leaving mid-year.
What's the fix?
So I have my own idea of what the fix should be. And it really involves revamping the system completely. I think we need to impart the love of learning across the board. And I know Glide has done some amazing things with thinking outside the box. Behaviors are out of control. I'm part of, I don't know if you've heard of the EAC, which is a division of ODE, Oregon Department of Education, the EAC Education something council. And so they like distribute funds and grant money. And I'm part of a group called the Regional Educator Network, and my team is focused solely on student behavior. And we've talked a lot about shrinking down the amount of time in the primary grades that kids have to do academics and focusing more on building relationships, because really kids are coming into school. And this is what I think the pandemic did, was it put everybody on social media far more than they were even before. And so those kids that were not even in school were raised in families where a lot of people were on their phones a lot of the time or on the computer a lot of the time. So they didn't have that that socialization that maybe we were used to prior to the pandemic. A lot of people trying to work from home, that type of thing. And then there's a lot of hands off. Like, I don't know how to manage what's happening with my child. And so here you go, you do it. So I think shrinking down how much academics are taught. Right now, I think there's so much, like Zach was mentioning, AI. You talk about your phone, you just like can easily do any kind of math you need to do on the phone. You can easily find any kind of information. So there's really not a necessity to do, yes, you still need to know how to read and to write and to do some simple math, but some of that more complex stuff, maybe you don't necessarily need that if your goal is going to be that you want to work in some kind of like a CTE, like a trade. So if you're wanting to work in a trade, you want to become a plumber, you want to become an electrician, you want to become something else, maybe that's not the focus. I know other countries, they split kids off into what they're interested in doing as a career far earlier than high school even. So, so I think kind of just revamping that, our whole idea of how we want to educate kids, what's the purpose of our education? Right now, we have a whole bunch of kids who are coming in who are super dysregulated. I don't know why they are. I mean, some technology issues, some family issues, probably the climate of our political system.
I was going to say our society is a little bit dysregulated. So,
Yes,
it certainly would impact the children. Um,
absolutely. You know, when a president can call another adult a pig, you know, what do you expect kids to do in the classroom? So a lot more social emotional learning. And as I was saying, that Glide is doing something that's completely different. They had 3 kindergarten classes, and they took their most experienced teacher, and they took the 6 kids, or the group of kids that were the most dysregulated and, like throwing a wrench into every single day. And they put those kids on a half day. And that half day is spent with that most experienced teacher in a classroom, just learning how to get along, just learning how to be a student, just learning to love school. And all of the other kids that were school ready, you might want to say, are in classrooms without the huge disruptions. And then in the afternoon, those kids all get spread back into the 3 classrooms. And when the kids that are in and the other 2 teachers are much newer, but when those in the afternoon, they're all back in their regular classrooms. And this was like a mid fall fix. Like, who does that? That is so out of the box. Beautiful. I really commend that principal for having the wherewithal to make that shift. But those kids that are in that classroom learning how to just be students, how to get along, they're going to graduate from that. They're slowly going to be reabsorbed into the other classes, so that then they are ready when they are in there. They're not being super disruptive. The other thing that I would say, that I think I'm doing a lot of talking, but I guess I'm the guest. The other thing that I'm going to say that I think is a huge issue, and why we're seeing that lack of bounce back after the pandemic, is that the behaviors are off the charts in the classrooms.
What
And
does that mean, behaviors?
um, so disruptive behaviors that's keeping the teacher from teaching. Even unsafe behaviors that are making other kids afraid to be in their classroom. So it is not uncommon for a classroom to have, maybe there's 23 kids in the classroom, and maybe there were 3 kids who are screaming, or throwing chairs, or who are completely defiant. And as the educator, if you have to manage that, if the expectation is, well, you've got to figure that out. When really that's above any kind of training that any teacher has ever received, no matter how much experience you have. I mean, I have my bachelor's degree was in psychology, and then I became a teacher. But most people don't have that. And you think about these brand new teachers who don't even have a bachelor's degree. How much time is spent dealing with the behavior in the classroom? It's huge. And so the amount of, that 2 hour or the hour and a half that is overkill for language arts, they're still not even getting that, because there's so much time spent on dealing with the behavior. And so that also, I think, is a huge it has a huge impact on the success of all students. Because if you have 2 or 3 of those kids in your classroom on a regular basis, you're probably only getting 70% of the education that you should be getting.
Mhm. And not only are there more people without degrees who are teaching in place of those who formerly did, but in just this last week, the Trump administration has classed education degrees as non-professional degrees.
I didn't see that.
One of the things, one of the components of gutting the Department of Education. Um, uh, but so there's the behavior element, the hazardous element. Um, you mentioned that you think is also related to the so-called political climate of the rhetoric one might see on television or social media of heads of state, like the Trump administration. And I wanted to ask how you see social reaction broadly affecting the culture of schools and also the relationship between teachers and broader community members like parents.
I think there's a lot of nervousness behind dealing with parents in terms of the political climate. During the pandemic, there was a lot of contention between, teachers wearing masks and asking students to wear masks, that type of thing. But I think it is kind of a shadow on anything that a teacher does. If I send something home, how is that going to be perceived? Uh, I mean, I'm of the age that if the teacher called your house, oh my goodness, like your, your parents were going to be like, oh, what is happening? But now if a teacher calls home, um, you don't know what you're going to get on the other line. You don't know as a teacher, is that is that parent going to be angry with me? Is that parent going to blame me for what's happening in the classroom? Especially with teachers who are young and not necessarily trained. So when I started teaching, there was such a partnership between the teacher and the family. And now that can be scary. Like there are a lot of parents who, if their child is misbehaving, it's the teacher's fault. And so I think uh, and also the rhetoric behind that teachers are left-leaning and teachers are, indoctrinating their children. I mean, I've had somebody tell me that I'm indoctrinating their children.
Do you want to share why you left the classroom?
So there are a couple reasons why I left the classroom. One of them came at the beginning of the pandemic, and it was right after the George Floyd. So we were all sent home, right, in whatever it was. I can't even remember the month, but March 13th or whatever. And then George Floyd happened, and then we were out for the whole summer, the rest of that school year, and then the whole summer. And then when we came back to school, um, Glide had the fires. And so we were still, because we didn't like get into the window of getting back, we were still all online. And so we had to send home uh, all this work. And so one of the books that we'd had in our library for a decade or more for my grade level was a book about racism. and I think it was called The Jacket. And I was like, oh, I have a really small class this year. And I didn't realize it. But the reason I had a small class was because parents didn't want their kids in my class because they saw that I was protesting George Floyd with the Black Lives Matter protests. That's another story. But so all of fourth grade sent home this book as one of 3 books for their class. My class was really small. I had enough copies, so everyone in my class got the book, and they were going to read it, and we were going to discuss it. And it was a common, a well-known author who'd written a lot of other books, but I thought this was because of what was happening in the community and in the country. This was a great book to read because it would open up some good discussion. And I had parents who called the principal and asked what my agenda was and were very upset. And we did not read the book. And it was just like there were probably 2 really angry parents in my small group. So that was the first thing that happened that year. And then towards the end of the year, I ended up taking fourth graders came back, and I was teaching all 4th, 5th, and 6th grade online students. And I was partnered with another teacher who was doing K through 3, and I was in charge of morning meetings. And we would do these, would you rather, eat a loaf of bread or eat a bag of marshmallows, those kind of crazy questions every morning. And we'd have a Zoom poll. And so I would go online and I would look for these questions. And so one of the questions was something like, would you rather be Superman or Batman? And I'm like, that's not very fair. Those are both men. So I was like, okay, Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Batgirl. Well, how come they get to be men? And, there's a girl for the other one. So I was racking my brains. And so I said, okay, would you rather be Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, or ISIS? And I don't know if anybody my age remembers the ISIS show with you do, Lori. I see you're nodding. Yes. And so I put that one up. And, all the kids took the poll, blah, blah, blah. I'm going about my day. And then I get a text from a friend who said, yeah, that question is on Facebook, and they are saying you are trying to indoctrinate kids into the Taliban.
Of course, the Taliban's a different organization than ISIS.
Yeah, whatever.
Not that they know that.
So
Hey, listen, I mentioned the literacy, issue. So,
so I
what would
had
you
to,
expect them to know?
but even so, I explained, my vice principal came down and I said, okay, this is a show I used to watch. This is, a goddess, and she was a 9th grade science teacher in the show, and right, she would like truth and justice, blah blah blah. And he's like, okay, don't worry about it, whatever. And I ended up having to write a letter of apology because even though it was explained to them that this was not that at all, nobody else said anything. It was one family who then made a big thing about it. And I wasn't going to lose my job or anything, but I was just like, I just cannot live my life being that careful. That, when somebody is looking for a reason to call me out, even after I said, and I brought it up to does anybody want to ask me any questions about that? And the kids didn't think anything of it. It was the parent.
Mhm.
And so just that idea that you were automatically assumed to be doing something wrong just didn't seem safe to me anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So
And
that parent now, right? I mean, now they got me out. I looked for another job that night. It was like in the spring. And got hired in my job within a few weeks. And I spent I was there for the rest of the year. And but it just makes me think like they didn't want me influencing their kids. Now I'm influencing all the kids of Douglas County.
Well, it does really say something that so
Who are now going to be like, for
the
generations to come teaching.
you left the classroom then against that as a 28-year term teacher at that school. So imagine a brand new teacher or somebody with, just a few years under their belt, the kind of animosity that is readily launched at teachers like that is easily going to drive people out. And I don't think it's any wonder that there's a dearth of people entering the field.
Well, and a lot of times the people that are entering the field are from that district. So they went to school there and they don't have their bachelor's degree yet. So they're not even people who have gone to like Eugene or SOU or something like that and experienced anything different. They're there. Yes, maybe they're feeling the pressure of that position in terms of the community, but they're not broadening that community at all. They're because most of those people are just going online to school. So prior to that, if you wanted your teaching degree, you had to go to Eugene or Portland or Ashland and you had a little bit more exchange with people with different ideas. But now we're just getting people who we're just growing our own. And so, yeah,
John has a question, I think, or wants to say something. John, you have
oh
your hand
yeah,
up.
go ahead.
Yeah, I was just following up on you. The news review had an article about the education system in Oregon and the fact that our fourth grade reading levels are 49th worst in the nation. We've even been surpassed by Mississippi. And I wanted to, maybe you could, and also I kind of wanted to point out too about this. You're talking about, I know they had a threat at Glide High School this past week about, some kid threatened to shoot up the school and everything. And I read about it online. Somebody posted on the Winston community page or something. And it was just crazy because it took a life of its own. And people, I don't know, they were like, I'm not going to send my kid to school, and it's all the school's fault, and blah blah blah. And it seemed like it was handled properly. The principal did his job, and the sheriff's office did their job. And to me, it was like the issue wasn't an education issue; it was a gun issue.
Yes.
Yeah, and it was just bizarre, and also it was they were going on the high school. They're kind of grinding on the Glide principal, and it's like I've known Kerry Dwight since he was a kid, So it was kind of a little personal to me. But yeah, so I know what you're saying there. But anyway, I want to get back to the issue about the fourth grade reading level.
So, yes, Mississippi has done some amazing things. They revamped their entire elementary education system, and they did a huge push, and they are finding some real success. I am not sure that we are honestly 49th out of 50. I would question the statistics a little, and but I will say that if you talk to parents because their kid is not coming to school or because their kid is not doing assignments, you do get a lot of pushback. So I think that it's a community issue. I think it is a parent issue, not valuing education, um, not holding their own kids accountable and having expectations of what it looks, what being a student looks like. I'll also say that not every kid is, you don't have to take the test in Oregon. You can opt out. And a lot of kids opt out, and it's not always the struggling kids, families that opt out. Sometimes it's the most educated parents who are like, this is bullshit. We're not, oh, excuse me, can I say that? We're not going to have our kids take these tests. As to the glide issue, I know about that issue. It was not a student. It was somebody that impersonated a student and set up a fake account because the name on the account was misspelled. So it was not even a student at the school that threat came from. And yes, I do know Kerry Dwight, and he's amazing. So yeah.
Well, it seemed to me, yeah, I mean, it was handled properly, and you had to give the sheriff's department some credit too. I mean, they were on top of it, and they had extra, and they had extra, they had extra, deputies there and everything. So, the criticism I was reading about it, was just bizarre. And to me, it just lets you know what,
Yeah.
what some of these parents are, are like you're dealing with, it just said a lot right there. So.
Mhm. Yeah, it strikes me that we've talked a bit about mob politics in the municipal arena, and it does seem to me that those mob politics of mobs showing up to like city hall for a council meeting and uh, you know
Like the soccer team.
pushing to like destroy a park or something like
Yeah.
those are the same kinds of folks who are also creating, it sounds to me like a reign of terror in schools almost.
I think it does. I mean, in terms of expectations, it comes from above, and it comes from that, you know, here's the thing about the Department of Education and the Department of Education being dispersed and put into all of these other things, all of these other organizations. I think part of the issue is from that perspective and from the state perspective is that they don't have people who are educators working in the schools, dealing with whatever it is that's happening, advising them and making those decisions. We have legislators, we have academics, and we have politicians and parents who don't really know what's happening and what is going to be best. The science of reading is a great example. Yes, there's research behind what creates memories to form in children. There isn't the same research spent on what makes a student a student. And I think if we looked into what makes a child want to learn, what makes a child willing to learn, and we don't spend any time researching that. We spend all our time on what's going to get a kid to read at first grade level, what's going to get a kid to read at sixth grade level. I think one of the most brilliant programs was what was in Ashland at Lincoln Elementary. There was a program called the Blenders, where kids were in a program in two different classrooms, and in those two classrooms, it was first grade to sixth grade. And those kids were fluid in those classrooms, learning from each other, doing experiments, doing projects, going on field trips. It was a rich environment where kids were so excited to learn to read, and parents were super involved. We are in a situation where parents are like, there you go. There's my kid. Teach them all the things they need. I mean, there are kids who don't know, or who aren't potty trained in kindergarten. So I think it's a shift, a societal shift that we need to make.
We do that. So if people could do something today or tomorrow, what should they start doing regarding education?
If you have your own children, you should start being intimately involved in their education. You should be reading to your kids. You should be watching documentaries. You should be having conversations.
Mhm. I think the term that comes to mind from sociology is enemy, from Emil Durkheim. Enemy is a term used to describe normlessness of people who are living in a society who are increasingly rendered or left without basic social norms. And that's a recipe for social collapse. Uh, I think the antidote to that, in my opinion, is establishing norms for ch for children. Basic customs, ways of life, and a sense of order and involvement and uh, uh, community interdependence, so that kids have a place in society, not just in a regiment.
I would also say if you don't have kids, to reach out to the kids in your neighborhood, to reach out the families with kids in your neighborhood and make connections that way, to put like one of those little book box things in your front yard or like little fairies around your house and reach out to those because that's where it starts. I mean, we can all say like, what are we going to do with those 11th graders? But you can't really start with the 11th graders. You got to start with the 2-year-olds and you've got to make that community, that connection, that um, how do we parent the parents who really don't know what they're doing or who really don't have the capacity. And that's, like that whole phrase, it takes a village. Um, but it does. It takes that community um, to really say like, this is not appropriate. I know we're past our time, but I was riding my bike the other day with my husband and, we were wearing our bike outfits and we rode past this one house and there were two like early teen girls and probably like a little boy that was 5 or 6. And he looked at us riding by and he goes, "You're weird." And he stuck his tongue out at us. And the girls both kind of said, "You don't talk like that." But it just, it really broke my heart because that is like, who does that? What is happening that a 6-year-old shouts to adults and has no, I mean, it's just, and that's the kids that are coming to school. And how do you deal with that as an educator and make it safe for everybody else in our schools? I don't know.
Well, yeah, I don't know that the schools are responsible for educating parents, right? I mean, talking about norms, Zach, if we have norms of behavior and expectation of adults in the society. Now, with freedom, people claim they can do whatever the hell they want, but that's not really the concept of freedom that even our Constitution is about. It's that, your rights begin and end with my rights, right? That we all have that barrier. And I think it's that lack of civics education. I do come from California as well, Southern California. And I came up here in 1990, and our oldest child was in high school. Actually, they were in the Glide school system. And then our youngest one was in middle school. And I, for one, in that era, the Glide School, the community, because so many teachers lived in the Glide area. And so many teachers actually donated their time. I was actually flabbergasted because, believe me, in a downtown inner city Long Beach, California school, that don't happen. Most of those white teachers, even the people of color who teach down there, don't live in those communities, and so it's a totally different culture. But I saw over the years, particularly when there was union conflicts that happened some years later, those people, those teachers who donated all this time to the school just quit doing it. So I think that that's even probably a bigger, that's just a microcosm. It's probably happened in a lot, probably rural schools, but even everywhere. Both of my older sisters were K through 12 teachers. Most of their career, one of them decided to go into private business and make more money, but they loved teaching, and they were good teachers. And what I saw with the one who did leave the system, very sad that the school system lost teachers like her because she was very dedicated. And even when I was a teenager, I would help her. She bought a lot of stuff for her students because she taught in a low income, predominantly Latino community in the LA Unified School District. And so I see that the problem, we don't respect teachers, we don't respect education, and in this society now, we don't even respect facts. So, you know, it's spiraling down. But I tell people that some of my most favorite people in the world are librarians, but they're also teachers. The people who are the people who know everything. And we pay sports figures. That always pisses me off, and I'm not going to talk about that because I don't think UCC should even have sports. Give me a break. No, education should be dominant, not sports. Max, you want to say something?
Yeah, I've been kind of just writing a couple notes and I feel like I'm ready to kind of I just I've always kind of noticed, yeah, the double standard with that. And where yeah, everything there's a lot of stuff that's like rewarded a lot and like supported in society, and we don't have that for teachers and like parents even, the um so I don't know. I mean, as a parent, I just kind of have experienced a lot of that kind of stress. And it's I feel like I guess the double standard I was going to say was like this a community to it takes a community to raise a child versus like you're the parent, so it's your job and stuff. And it's like if you didn't like prepare to be a parent, then there's all kinds of noise about that stuff that is really discouraging. And being to where you have to like have two full-time jobs to really afford a household like that. And usually the stress involved either just kind of is tolerable to a certain extent if there's enough like stability in the family. But I mean, I found largely it's kind of normal not to have a very functional family, and in a lot of ways like, and as a result I was just thinking today, like if I'm going to run for mayor, I kind of need to like work on myself becoming like less of a kind of insufferable person to even be around for most people, because there's only a very small amount of people that like can tolerate apparently like even so yeah, I've been wanting to again this year seeing my son go right into seventh grade now, or sixth grade, uh whichever one he's starting in middle school at Joe Lane now, which Joe Lane Middle School. And so we're looking at he's just kind of surprised at how much work. He doesn't seem to like it's a new concept, a lot of new stuff and a lot of new expectations. And it does feel like kind of a thing where it's like, okay, it's you got to get in line and get this stuff done. And it's not really about like a wholesome education or anything. It's more about, I don't know, just kind of following orders or whatever, and being really good with your time and not looking around and socializing or whatever. And so it is kind of like desocializing to me, But at the same time, I want to get involved, and I'm not really that. I mean, I still haven't even done the computer thing where I'm supposed to go onto Canvas or whatever and get into the school documents. And so I'm more like, I want to go and be more involved, like in person. But yeah, so the COVID thing has kind of made that the norm. Um, but yeah, anyway, as a couple of things. Yeah, I wanted to be a teacher when I first went into college at UCC. I was like, I want to go right into education because I felt like art education needs help and stuff. And just kind of like seeing how the dynamic of school is kind of like you have to know what is going to be getting you a job. So everybody was into nursing back in that time, like um, so they weren't into that, people were just like kind of discouraging of any kind of philosophy degree or like arts or whatever, because it's kind of like it's not lucrative or whatever. And so I don't know. I tried to get a kind of a rounded education about stuff. And actually, one of the things I did was I was on a newspaper thing, which I think got me the job I have now designing the newspaper because of that little time that I spent messing around with like InDesign. So I was able to say I did that. But anyway, what did you want to say something, Betsy? Or that's pretty much. I could say more, I think, but
I, I'd like to stick a pin in the thing that you mentioned at the beginning of that about it takes a community or it takes a village, the
yeah,
phrase was also brought up earlier. Uh, I think that's an ongoing question that we should all be asking ourselves. If it takes a village to raise a kid, to impart and develop basic norms in order for us to function socially, to be a community that is a community. We need the village. And
right.
there's a question like, do we have a village? Do we have villages? I think that what was brought up earlier about in a neighborhood having, say, those like front yard lending libraries, it gets me to think the neighborhood is the space that needs to be made into a village of a kind.
Mhm.
Uh, Neighborliness, people knowing each other by name in their neighborhoods. Even in neighborhoods that I've lived in, like a lot of people don't know each other, and that's not helpful for basic community cohesion and mutual assistance where needed. Um, being able to being able to trust and rely on your neighbors, and for kids to be able to trust and rely on the people in their neighborhood to some degree is part of what it takes to be a village. So if
Mhm.
it takes a village, but then it takes making the village for
Yeah. And Lori, did you say you have?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
did want to say something. But besides that, that's like fostering civility and what you were saying, Allison, about him sticking the 6-year-old sticking his tongue out and stuff like that. And just like becoming more emboldened to be these ways is getting bigger and bigger. But that's not what I was really going to speak to. But yeah, we definitely as a community need more of that. And it's relationship centric is super important. And I'm noticing that we're really missing that. And COVID's accentuated that. But part of some of the bridges out of poverty work and literacy are when intergenerational poverty and children go into school, they've been exposed to very limited amount of words and then also a lot of commands. So they're not getting the same access to even just words and thinking and critical thinking skills as maybe somebody in middle class and upper class or wealth, and being rural and being in a county that's very that we are a lot of poverty in our county here, that really just kind of magnifies what we've got going. It's growing actually intergenerationally. And so, kind of in some of my community building work that I'm kind of thinking about is how we can maybe do some of this, circles and community building work where we're bringing families and building community with how to do this bridges out of poverty kind of work, and addressing valuing education and reading to your children, and moving, exposing to language besides commanding. And you don't know what you don't know, so
Right.
you gotta start there too.
Um, did any of you go to the longest table?
Not this year.
That event at, by Thrive Umpqua. Well, they're having a tomorrow night is and Max, you might be interested in this with your kids. But they're having the Ride the Lights tomorrow night at River Forks Park, where you can bring your bike and ride through the lights for free. You can either ride or walk. I think it starts at, I think they're signing people in at 5:15. And there's refreshments afterwards, and you can bring your bike or and your family or your scooter or whatever it is. And that one of those kinds of events, that's a great event for community building and finding something else outside of your small neighborhood to be a part of. I'm going to be there.
That's cool. I heard about that. I'm excited about it. You said that was
Are you going to
tomorrow
go?
night? I
Yeah,
was
it's
thinking
tomorrow
about
night.
it. I mean, I just hadn't really planned. I need to fix my bike actually and get that ready because I've had a couple flat tires for like a month now. I've been lazy about it. But I mean, uh, but you said the longest table, was that an idea that came up from the longest table?
No, but it makes me think, I mean, all of the things that Lori mentioned just make me think of like, because it's all about, the longest table was all about, community building and finding projects and ways to connect with your,
Yeah,
um, so
that's cool. I'm trying to remember the conversation I had at my table about the at the longest table thing. Um, but yeah. Anyway, cool. That
I
sounds like
love,
Anybody else have comments or questions about this topic? No? Allison, you have any parting words?
I would just really point out, Lori wrote in the chat, fostering civility. And to me, that is the heart of education and what you want kids to walk away from school with. Um, it doesn't matter how well you can read if you can't interact with the rest of your community, because then you can't really offer them anything. I used to talk about with my class learning how to be courteous. And like that was something that I really wanted kids to learn. But I love your idea of fostering civility. And if we could have that be our focus, we would all be better.
Oh, well, thank you, Allison. You do good work in our community. Thank you for bringing your heart and your talent and your amazing abilities wherever you go with to us.
Well, thank you for inviting me and listening to all of my rants.
Loved it.
My
Yeah,
passion.
thank you. Yeah, thank you very much. And
Thank
thank
you.
you for your son. Um, because you certainly did a good job there. And as a person who's also a mother, I think that's one of the most important things, the influence we can have on our own children, no matter whether they follow our path, as long as they're, decent human beings. And Zach seems to be that. Glad
Thank
I
you.
met
I
him.
agree.
Yeah, thanks.
All right. So, you're welcome to stay. Does anybody have anything else they want to talk about what happened this past week? It was always fun. But upcoming stuff and mostly around Douglas County. I did want to say I saw a reduce reuse spiel from the city of Roseburg. I'm always critical of what they do, so I just want to say kudos. However, I would encourage people to just quit buying shit.
Yes.
Okay, and that's how you solve that problem.
I just wanted to bring up, it doesn't pertain to Roseberry, but our friend Bernie Woodward signed that contract with the city of Grants Pass for that homeless camp. What I found interesting, of course, I don't have all the details. I didn't really realize it until I read in the paper. And it gave him, he gets 1.2 million, and he's supposed to provide shelter for 150 people.
Right.
That figures out 8,000 per person, which isn't very much money, really.
Well, no, and I don't know that it's individual units for people. You know, that's the that and the one thing Bernie Woodard's, illegal labor camps here is a much different scenario than what's happening in Grants Pass. Grants Pass had to find somebody to build a place for them because it's a settlement and a lawsuit.
Right.
The number one point, people, I guess they couldn't get property in time to meet the criteria. I do know that some of the city council people were all the city council people before they made that vote were made aware of what's happening here. And so there was a few people who dissented from going with Bernie Woodard. I think it was a 5-2 vote. I don't remember what they said. But I think that, the problem with what's happening here is the entity, the city of Roseburg, is not actually doing what they legally could do to stop Bernie Woodard and the illegal labor camp. What's happening in Grants Pass is this, there's objective criteria of what they have to perform, and notwithstanding whether he's a good contractor or not, he certainly has the background for a construction contractor. So the development side, I think, would be good. The other thing, and this is what I knew from the very beginning, that part of the settlement provided money for the Disability Rights Oregon to oversee the project for a year and to make sure that was running and accommodating into the American with Disabilities Act. And there's also a number of people, now in Grants Pass that are kind of aware of what's going on. And the reporter who did the original story for Jefferson Public Radio, we've been in contact, and she's interested in doing follow-up stuff regarding it. So about here, what's happened here.
Well, the article said that he bought some property down there for 200,000.
Yeah. And he's also he has a group that's actually going to be doing like the case management and outreach. That group has a good reputation. What I know about it in
Okay.
Grants Pass, the medical outreach stuff. So he won't be able to do the same thing he's doing at his privately owned camps here.
Okay.
Just some other shenanigans.
Well, I'm going to suggest he just close these down, because what he's got is money to operate. His business model is, I have no money to operate, I'll just exploit the people that need the tent space. Right.
Well,
that's a flawed model.
Well, that's the American business model.
Well, true. Not quite in that way. But, yeah. So, anything else?
Max, do you know anything about the longerist table event?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean that seems to have come from like a conversation me and Johnny had where I was kind of trying to explain the problems I had with the longest table, kind of just as a thing that I wanted to go. Like I didn't really want to go to it that bad because it just seemed kind of like exclusive in a way. I don't know. And the whole, I mean, and so it's not to knock the people doing it. Like I wasn't really against it, but Johnny was just kind of asking me like, um, if I was excited about it or whatever. And um, so then he was like, well, okay, I kind of get what your concerns are, and so maybe we should have our own thing that's the longest. And I was like, well, I mean, I don't want to do like a reactive thing again, like in response to what they're doing. I just want to, that's just my opinion about it. And so I think it came from that to a conversation with Jared mostly, because he's the one that kind of spearheaded the thing, I think, because I was talking to Johnny about it. And that's what he was saying was, well, it's more Jared, I think, that's organizing it. So it seems like this kind of like Ouija board effect where we're just like, um, doing stuff. But so I mean, it seems like it's going to be a huge deal. He's got like a bunch of hams and stuff, and a bunch of turkeys being cooked, and a
And
bunch of
actually,
food.
you're talking about the one that's actually piggybacked on Team Smile's
I guess, yeah,
annual
yeah, they're
event,
totally,
right? Yeah,
totally,
Housing
yeah.
for Sump was actually renting the gazebo
Right.
at Gaddis Park,
So
and
it's a
that was for
whole,
Team Smiles, the one that they do, and kind of what is it, food not bomb, kind of injected, into that.
hmm
Is that what happened? Yeah. So that's
yeah,
what's called the longest, or whatever you call the table.
longest table, yeah.
Yeah.
And so I don't know, I mean, much about it because I'm kind of just not involved with the organizing of all that stuff. And um, yeah, so I don't mean to like criticize it. I tend to just have this weird critical view of everything. And like, kind of feel like I'm getting more cynical as I continue. And you know,
Well, I would think that there's a good number of people in the community who do not think the longest table is for them and would not show up because of it. That's the reality, you know.
well, and there's some,
And
yeah,
I don't know that it was marketed to a broad swath of people who live in various places, in order for that to even happen. So it's still a great thing to try to bring people in the community together. But I didn't. The homeless people living at Deer Creek probably didn't get an invite or weren't told
Mhm.
about it. So,
Yeah.
you know,
The
for
no, and the
example.
ones that roam downtown were around, and they were, and like one of them kind of like yelled at people, and then another person was like reportedly eating stuff off the table or whatever after everybody kind of like dispersed or whatever. And just, there was some discussion about that on Facebook, even that I thought was interesting because it shows kind of like when people have critical viewpoints, it gets like kind of thrown away, and that person is like seen as just like an enemy, like you were saying earlier, Zach, the enemy thing. Because
Oh
like,
no, Anomie,
okay, maybe. And
Anomie. Yeah.
okay. Oh yeah, sorry, I wasn't really.
Anomie, normlessness.
Anyway, so I mean, I just kind of feel like already a weird like reject of society. I was going to say more about that with the education, talking about education, because from pretty early on in school, I was kind of like, and a lot of kids are just the ones that are not really. And at the same time, everybody liked me. I don't know. It's kind of a different thing than the normal like, you know, uh, receiver of the bullying kid or whatever. I don't know, but like I don't know the weird animosity and the reign of terror that you mentioned, Zach, is it's real and it's psychological terrorism, and that's why I was like I can't ever go into school. Like once I started reading like critical theories about the K through 12 system and how it was. Anyway, not to go all back into that, but I just felt like I didn't say enough about that during the podcast. I don't think. I don't know. We're not. Yeah, we're not. Are we still? We're not live still, are we?
We are.
Yes, we are
Oh, that's
still we
cool.
are still live. We will
Well,
we
that's
will
great.
be
No,
live until you hear me say we're not live anymore.
right. No, I didn't hear. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Anyway,
And
cool. No.
school has I've there's a lot of criticism over the decades of the structure of American schools, and there are better models, European models, or stuff that I studied when my children were small. And that's and the issue of how they can't solve the problem, so they regurgitate. So when I was a kid, phonics was predominantly taught. By the way, there are children with specific learning disabilities that cannot learn to read phonetically very easily. It's
Mhm.
a memory sequencing process. And so if you have a deficit in memory sequencing, which certain people like my husband who has a learning disability has, that you have to learn sight reading, learning all the word and that memory regurgitation. And so in teaching reading, there's been this circle from, oh, let's do all sight reading because that might be easier. Well, then there's kids who have problems with sight reading. So it's really that multifaceted thing. But to go from when I was doing this in the 90s, and I not only did the literacy coordinator, I've also done special education for kids in the K through 12 system. As an advocate, I've actually helped them, get the special ed services, including in the Glide School District and the Rose School District here. And the problem is when you're looking at kids with learning disabilities or other disabilities specifically, then it's the school is a one size fits all, and that's what it's always really ended up being, and doesn't do well with anybody outside of that norm, whether that person is someone who learns easily or someone who does not learn easily or learns slowly, right? Because this processing of speed,
Well,
well,
because it's
some people
a slow process, right?
sometimes. And actually, like we were talking, people don't want to read. They don't even want to listen to this thing because it's boring. And I said, well, maybe we should aspire to have people who have an attention span because that's really what we need.
That's what it comes
Some
down to.
things
Yeah.
can't be memes, right?
And then that's yeah, exactly. And that's what those tests and what they're learning with what Allison was saying, the topic sentence, and you go back and read for comprehension really fast because you're going through the assignments to get through the chapter so you can be done with your chapter so you could do some artwork. So
Mhm.
they're just doing like little tiny chapters and posts and stuff. It's just
Right,
like we're not nurturing attention spans to get through a novel nowadays.
right, and like we were saying
Or
earlier,
even language,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
language is the important thing in the idea of concepts. It doesn't have to be written language, right?
Mhm.
Because verbal language preceded written language, right? For
Yeah.
humans.
Yeah. My niece has a hard time talking and she's a teenager and she's just always on her phone. It's hard for her to even verbalize. And it's really interesting to see how that's changed over the years.
Mhm. Yeah, and speech oratory ability is critical. Our ability to speak to an audience, but even more importantly, speaking to each other and being articulate and clear and coherent in what we mean. I struggle
totally.
with
And
Well, and having something to say rather than like you're weird or whatever, because that's it comes down to a lot of that, and even in political discourse or whatever, it's like it's
Yeah.
very unsubstantial,
that.
and so it leaves the reader going like, and the common person that's just like, am I just too dumb to understand these people, or are they just actually as dumb as they kind of look? As far as like, anyway, like we talked about a while back on this podcast. So it's kind of a idiocracy kind of a feeling. But it's kind of too bad because then you become the elitist where you're too aloof, because then
that's right.
and so I try to ride that line of like being kind of explaining things in a way that's like really simple to understand and
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, it's funny you say idiocracy because
Right.
I recently learned the etymology of the word idiot.
Oh, really? Yeah.
It goes back to uh, ancient Greece and Rome, and it had this original meaning of a private citizen, a private person in their private life. And actually, in the 19th century, it was reimagined as meaning somebody who's politically ignorant.
Hmm.
So to say if somebody's an idiot, they're politically ignorant or they're ill-informed. And I think in that sense, we're definitely, and maybe idiocracy is the right word. We are a society of and ruled by politically illiterate people.
Well, if we're talking about
That's
And
words,
that
great,
includes a
Zach.
lot of that includes, virtually all of us to one degree or another. We are actively having to learn how to do politics, how to do civic life, how to do how to live in a society together.
hmm
We're having to
Yeah,
learn all this stuff.
well, and I mean, if we're talking about words, like that's another word I've been thinking about that you mentioned is a village, and like when on Roblox they call them the villagers, and they're just the random people that you find walking. And so I keep thinking, well, that sounds like the most dignified way to describe people. Going around the whole homelessness or unhoused or displaced or whatever. I mean, the villager is the basic noble citizen, So I kind of want to start like a villager movement or something behind that, because that also, being in Roblox or not on Minecraft, it kind of actually speaks to the visceral experience of the youth, even. So I don't know,
Mhm.
just trying to think of things in new ways. But it's just a private thought that I just thought, from when I first found out about the villagers on that, I was like, oh, they're just kind of like the people that are just living there, however they live or whatever.
yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah, I kind of like
Lori.
that, Max, because you can't separate yourself as easily from an
yeah.
unhoused person, unsheltered person, whatever you want to say that, homeless. When
Hmm.
they're a villager, you can't separate yourself from them as easily. Or
Yeah.
that,
So are we all
people.
villagers? Yeah. And
Yeah,
then
it's
we're village
harder to
idiots.
separate you from them as a community member.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I use the term neighbors a whole lot when I refer to
That's a
people
good one.
living outside because that's really who they are. That they're
Yeah.
kind of village is the same concept, but
But yeah, I
they're in
just,
our neighbors, and they're kind of our equals. They're not something that categorized otherwise.
that's a good
So if
point.
we change the words, um,
I like to think of it like the phrase that I've been using is Mr. Rogers municipalism.
There we go.
Everybody's your neighbor.
Yeah.
and
Yeah. That's a good point.
Yeah.
we can just have a group and we all wear cardigans, right?
Perfect.
And loafers
Well, I mean,
or
we're
slippers.
neighbors in that the term neighbor is relational. When we refer to
Yes,
ourselves as a neighbor, it means that we understand that we are in a relationship with everybody around us. When we refer to somebody else as a neighbor, we understand that they are connected to
true.
us through that relationship.
Yeah. So,
Yeah,
We're not just individuals. We are, yes, distinct people, but we are part of
hmm
neighborhood.
Yeah.
and
well,
it
and
explains people in that relationship with us, right? Even in place, right? So it identifies, a common place um,
mhm.
by just
Yeah.
saying neighbor.
So that
And I
our
didn't even think of
neighbors
that.
that are homeless and unsheltered or living a certain lifestyle.
Well, and yeah, and I didn't want to get off too much on a tangent of that because, like, it is kind of a superficial thing, whether we call it one thing or another. It comes down to like the actual policy and the public policy and stuff. So, I mean, like we see with the whole Trump Mondani collab recently, where it's all they're gonna be friends now or whatever. It's just another kind of like way to. I mean, it's great that things seem to be going a little bit more like chill. But anyway, what I'm saying is I was gonna say something else about
Hey,
something.
listen, I'm going to interject that Trump is just out of his mind. So
Right,
that's why he's temporarily getting
right,
along
right,
with Montani. Let's be
yeah,
honest. This can change at any second moving
right. So,
forward.
but I mean, I don't want to like I do think that the language we use is fundamentally important in another way too. But anyway, yeah, so it becomes like, um, let's see. I forgot what else I was gonna say. I had something else I was gonna say, but I forgot. Sorry.
All right. Anybody else want to bring anything else up? So, next week I have invited Ashley Hicks to come on the show, and everybody who knows her may groan,
You know what?
but it's about the an issue she's been raising, which she actually has a good point on. We have what they call the local public safety what is it, Public Safety Coordinating Council. Okay. Now, this sounds like something good, Public Safety Coordinating Council. Well, don't get too exciting. It's established under the Oregon Department of Justice, and it's about recidivism. So in Oregon, they have a philosophy of jail. So you come from Douglas County and you go to jail, you go in the prison system, right? You're going to come back and be released in parole and probation in this county. So this council is made up of all the people who you might ever imagine would be involved in the criminal justice system, and plus a few others. And they meet periodically. It's required by state law that counties must have them. And when I first found out about them, quite a few years ago now, it was only to get a particular grant. So they never convened, they never did anything really until there. Chris Boyce is the county commissioner liaison and is the chair of the committee. But Ashley raised a very good point. One of the things the coordinating council's duty when you look at state law is to make sure that people who are coming out of the jail system or in parole and probation are housed, have a job, blah, blah, blah. So what is their role? And I think this is an important question to ask. If given the number of people that are probably, let's say, even at Deer Creek, who may be in that system or have come out of it, um, is it actually that committee's role to make sure those people aren't living outside? So if she's not going to do it next week, she'll do it in one of the other two Sundays in December. And 2 weeks from today, we're going to actually have the organizer for the Rural Organizing Project is going to be our guest on this show and talk about all the things that they do. And don't necessarily advocate for an ROP chapter or whatever in Douglas County because we have a lot of things, a lot of organizations happening here that are stretched thin and does really parallel work, community rights being one, and actually ROP community rights in the Douglas County Democrats a couple of years hosted Chuck Willer that came in and did an economic development, building wealth in rural community forum at the library. So ROP but they are very good at organizing and have a lot of resources that I don't really see people who are trying to organize efforts in this community having ready access to. So even if so it's a resource that you can collaborate with, even with Food Not Bombs or anything else that you might want to do that might help the people who are doing that develop some skills around community organizing that maybe not all of you have,
Yeah,
or
she
maybe
has a
not any of you
toolkit.
have.
Yeah, she has a toolkit, or they're coming out with a toolkit as well, too. That sounded good.
Yeah,
I had a quick
yeah.
question. Does Ashley Hicks represent a certain organization?
She not that I know.
Oh,
She was a city council person here in Ward 4, and she no longer lives in the city. She did a lot of cleanups along the river, and her cleanups ended up being, harassing homeless people, and so she created a lot of controversy around that. And sometimes she has good ideas, like anybody does. But the community actually in the downtown neighborhood, we had an organization called Service, and the acronym stands for something. But that group, she was in conflict a lot with that neighborhood association we had organized here. around things she didn't like doing, because we were actually advocating for porta potties and trash cans for folks living outside. We were advocating for, yeah, move them out of the park, but find a place for them kind of go. And she was becoming more and more. She was a downtown business person for a while and claimed the homeless were always harassing her, but I saw good evidence that the reverse was true. So. So that's why I said if people know her, particularly when she was living here, but she's still involved. She actually ran I think she got elected to the fire district in Glide, didn't she?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Recently. A couple of years ago, she ran for county commissioner. The last time that they ran 4 years ago. I wouldn't be surprised if she jumped in that race again.
It'll be the third or fourth time for us.
Yeah. So that I wouldn't be surprised if she did.
She showed up one time when we were doing our cleaning at our community cleaning for the Riverside Park there in Roseburg. It was kind of a disaster.
Yeah, I mean,
she really harassed the home. She really harassed the homeless people there. So
yeah. And I know, so she and I have had a contentious relationship, but also I'm willing to give her credit, if credit is due, if she comes up with a good idea. So she had brought this up on the Nextdoor site, and I said, hey, I'll offer you to come on the show if you'd like to talk about it, because I think it's something that people might be interested in. And she might have a point. I mean, there really might be something that they legally have an obligation to do more about when people come out of jail. Because if it's about reducing recidivism, the data is there about you need housing and a job.
And they
to
might
help
be
reduce
doing that too, because I do know that I've been a part of, and I've seen you there too, Betsy, that subcommittee and on the Lipstick subcommittee and for the housing as well. And ADAPT works closely and they do offer funding. And I know that through that grant,
RSAP.
they also fund Chadwick Clubhouse. They give some money there too for people with the mental illness. So, and ADAPT gets some funding as well through that grant that comes in through the lipstick thing.
Yeah, I haven't paid attention. I haven't paid attention to it for quite a while.
Yeah.
But when I was involved in it, it started out with $500 total.
Oh, wow.
And $1,500 total that we were able to raise it. But that was around the beginning of the pandemic, and the pandemic infused a lot of money in.
Okay.
Right, into these systems. And so that a lot of the housing that has happened, including clearly the navigation center, people might understand that, but even funding like the social determinants of health, because of the way Medicaid is now being under attack, there may not be those resources that are coming out of Umpqua Health Alliance. And I don't know if Aviva pays for housing, but you're right. ADAPT does, right? And they actually even bought the couple of motels, right? They own a couple in
You
downtown
can does
Roseburg.
too. I think sometimes they help with the housing, more on that housing model.
Yeah, but and I'm not sure how much theirs is medical, because they do have that continuum of care is the funding that's designated through HUD that has actually been changed under the Trump administration as well. But I didn't mean to segue into all that. We don't have time.
I did want to ask you real quickly. I don't know if Max was there during and I don't know if who was on the work group for the homeless through the work group on homelessness for the city. And one of the things that I'm kind of dumbfounded by is that they brought up how people take buckets of, their excrement to the river creek area. And
They did talk
and
about
dump
that,
it.
didn't they? I forgot.
They dump it, but they're not talking about porta potties or trying to do that. And why is that not talked about or brought up, or like a Band-Aid?
It's like
because they're assholes.
Well, it's an insult to the intelligence. That's what I keep saying is like a lot of this stuff, a lot of people are really significantly alienated, not just a joke, like where, that person's just salty. Or no, this is ridiculous. It's really hard to even come at them in a real, in a serious way at the city council. They're all just looking at you like, what, because, I mean, they don't have any power of it. So they're just as frustrated. And then, yeah, don't even get me started. But
Well,
yeah, I
it
have a
can't cost
huge
that
thing.
much to at least have some porta potties down
Right,
there. It's
right.
all our water. It's public
And then,
health. It's
well, so
like
it's the
it's
scapegoating of the poor people, and it's
it,
the complete
it's just like
workforce.
let's
Yeah.
just like at least bare minimum put a band-aid on something like that.
Well,
Well,
and
we
it
have had,
is a
well,
waste
I'm
of
going to
money.
say we have had porta potties, and there was a whole contingency of people whose name you might even recognize who actually worked to get porta potties downtown in 3 locations. One a location they still have them, the other they don't. Too long to go into tonight, but one of the things that happened is it is a health hazard. The shit on the river is a health potential biohazard, right? It's not urine, it's shit. And how I know this? Because of all the work I've done studying the problem of shit in the river because of the stupid public policy, which started years ago with some of our city council people saying if you put porta potties, it would enable people to be homeless. You want to know why we
That's
don't
what they
have porta
said.
potties?
Exactly it.
Why?
Because that mentality, right?
Oh,
We're not
okay.
going to do anything to make it easy for people to be homeless. And UCAN was the agency that was actually paying and maintaining for the porta
I
potties when we
remember
finally
that.
got it.
I was there
And
when
they
that
it
happened.
and it was actually Mike Fieldman was the director when that happened,
Oh,
not Sean Pritchard. Sean had nothing to do with other than it was already in place and set up.
oh.
And the problem ended up being that the porta potty on across from the Rose where I live was set on fire at least twice. The last time it was set on fire is when you can pulled out of the
Yeah.
porta potty problem.
And I can't
But
imagine it being any better at the camps either, unmanaged camps. Like I'm sure it'll be floating down the river or something too. Like I mean, so
Unless they
I don't
do it
know.
right, they have zero vision on how to actually make something like that. No, not. That's the things like their lack of attention to how to. There's so many creative ways you can find ways to make sure that a porta potty doesn't get vandalized, like to the point of it flowing that
Yeah,
getting.
like chain it
And there's
to a tree or something
right, and there's
when it's
just
down
yeah.
there or something.
So
Just
yeah,
get like let's get something down
the
there.
lack of
It
even
can't be
talking
that
about it is
expensive.
right.
It's disgusting. And we know it's a problem and we're trying to solve this problem. At least let's get porta potties down there.
No, and then so
yeah.
you notice too during that time of
I'm gonna
talking
go
about it,
there tomorrow night.
they're like, "Is tomorrow a thing?"
I think so.
City
Oh,
council.
Well, I was
city
spreading
council.
some misinformation about that on Facebook about how, oops, I said that next Monday I was going to go to the city council meeting, but it's not on Monday. It's on like December 8th or something. So,
Oh, is it?
Oh, so they're
yeah,
not
yeah,
having it
it's,
tomorrow night
They're
at
not?
I
all.
don't
They
think
canceled
so.
it. Is that what they said?
Well, that's what I'm saying is, well, and
I have
see,
to go look.
They're
I'm
supposed
really
to be the
bad at
second
this.
and fourth, second
Second.
and fourth Monday of the month.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
Right. So it's not tomorrow, right?
I don't know.
Right.
I have to look. Probably not then, Max. You're probably right.
It's either tomorrow night or it isn't. Okay, that's that's as close as I'm getting
I
to it.
love your voice of reason, Betsy.
Well, shit, it should be tomorrow. Anyway, so well, Zach, I think said, but maybe he was talking about something else. So that's why I get confused with all these meetings, and because I thought the homeless commission, whatever it was last time, was a meeting, but it wasn't. It was a work study session. So we weren't allowed to say anything, which kind of.
That's right. That's
And
right.
so what
Last
I wanted to say
Monday
about
was
that
a work
was,
session. Yes.
yeah. So what I wanted, so I don't know if
It is.
The other Zach was talking about tomorrow not being the meeting or not being the homeless commission meeting, which is on December 8th or something. So I don't know. Anyway, so if there is a meeting, I'm going to be there tomorrow, right, for sure.
It
But
is a meeting
I think,
tomorrow.
right, yeah, the city council meeting, right? So yeah.
And the homeless commission is usually on the fourth
Uh-huh.
Monday of the month. But
Yeah.
did they might have changed it to every other month. I don't remember what they did.
Well, they
The
did
homeless
change it. They changed it to make it less often, which also pissed me.
Okay.
But the other thing I was
Okay.
going to say was the talking points that happened. What I noticed, my take on the homeless work study session was that Zach and a couple other the people on the council were actually making progress and starting to shift the conversation away from where to how. And I was kind of realizing, oh, that's what we need to talk about, obviously, to gain the trust of the community, show how we're going to do it, and stuff like a vision for how to do these things. And so the other thing I noticed was every time there was a shift, there would be an attempt from, and I think of this as a nefarious thing, but maybe they just are confused. Larry and the police officer that was there, I don't know his name, but they both wanted to say, well, no, we've talked to everybody down there and they don't want to change, and this is where their friends are, and what do you do with that percentage of them that are just not going to change? And they, for some reason, I don't think they said they like living there, but they just were like, they're not going to go to a thing. So what I was saying was like, yeah, you need to start with the vision so you can get the trust of the community, the people, the neighborhood that's going to not want it in their neighborhood, and then also the people that it's going to serve to actually be useful and a place worth going to
Yeah.
for them.
But when Larry is saying something like that,
They try to
we
derail
talk,
it every time.
we
Yeah,
talk to these people and they don't want to do anything. He is pathologizing homelessness.
right, exactly.
Not just addiction, homelessness. That
Yeah,
homelessness is an intrinsic characteristic of a person that cannot be changed. And
right.
what does that mean? It means the only way that you can solve the problem is to let them die or to
Move them
off
on.
them.
Right.
That's the mentality. That's why nothing gets done. Because there are people on that council who do think in those terms.
Mm-hmm.
Even if they're not expressing it like, oh, I don't want people to die. They don't care. They want those people gone one way or another. And so that is also the relevance of running for mayor. Because that agenda needs to be changed, rhetoric needs to be changed, and those a-holes need to be gone. Those a-holes on the city council should not be on the city council because they do not see their neighbors as human.
Right.
And clearly,
Well,
it's not just crap in the river. That's a problem. That our city council
Yeah.
does not care about the river in general. They didn't care about it with the park.
Yeah.
They're
Obviously.
not going to care about it
well,
in
true.
this case. The river is not an issue for them.
Yeah. And I don't know if it's Chavez, but I think that's the police officer that is overseeing the camp sweeps and the harassment of folks living outside. So I don't know if he was the one at the work session. I'm assuming he was.
He's not.
And
It's a different guy, I'm pretty sure.
okay.
That's at the work session. Yeah. Yeah. Travis is interestingly not there. I'm pretty sure. I don't know, mistaken, or
I think it was
if
the
I'm
Maybe
not
that
mistaken.
changed.
Hmm?
Was it Coffenstein?
I'm pretty
Coffenstein?
sure it's still Chavez that's
Okay.
doing it, but the other
Oh,
guys
but they
always
had the
at the
chief.
meeting.
Yeah, it makes sense that
Right.
Gary was there. Yeah. Um,
Anyway, sorry not to derail you.
well, yeah, and I'm going to say to the, I'd say to them as I do to anybody, point out to me who said they wanted to live in this shit, literally, and I'll go talk to them, and I bet you I'm going to get a different answer out of them. For one, a cop asking any person, questions about that stuff, you might just make this shit up just to get the person, to shut up.
Cops
Um,
lie. They do all the time.
right. Quit bugging me. I'll just tell you anything you want to hear. Go away. Or you don't want to hear. So you go away. So, but I think the toilet question, and I don't want to be flippant, but one of these days I will bring a brochure. My friend who is a co-founder of Housing First, Uncle Martha, passed away this past summer. I think I've already told this story here, but the city, and they still may had it, had a poop brochure for your dog poop, picking up your dog poop in the park. And it was on, the desk at City Hall. And so Martha saw that. She was a graphic artist kind of person and could do all kinds of shit. So she brought it home because we were living together and said, we were talking about, she goes, look at this. And we were arguing about porta potties for people who are
Mhm.
living outside of the point, all over at the time. And so she, put her skills to work and transferred the brochure into people and had a toilet and a person pooping into the toilet or pooping on the ground. So she made her own trifold brochure, and we went to the city council and she handed it out to them and
That's
said,
perfect.
you understand the importance of your dog not crapping in the park,
Yeah.
but yet you
No, and
ignore the fact
yeah,
that humans. Yeah.
yeah, and there's
So
more.
I still have that brochure she made, so I think I'll reproduce
We need
that
to,
again
yeah,
and
Like
start
we're back
handing
in
it
the
out.
dark ages right now with that.
We are.
Like, you don't
It's
understand that. How are we going to get tourism here with up the
right.
river? Like, put a restaurant on the
Jeez.
river when they're putting little big floaters coming on down the river.
our only problem used to only be the Myrtle Creek sewer plant overflowing once a month, once a summer, right? So
Oh,
if you were downriver, I
oh.
haven't heard about that. Maybe they're just reporting it out. So I don't
It
know.
doesn't
Maybe they
exist if
fixed
it
it.
doesn't get reported.
That's right. Oh, I don't know. It went away. I don't know. They might have fixed
Hey,
it, but
speaking of which, I want to plug the Frog Leg Studio zine that's coming out very soon. It's imminent. It's almost it's almost here. I
all right.
I appreciate all the submissions I've gotten, but there is still time to put in some, any kind of material anybody wants to put in, and this is definitely you
When's
know,
the deadline?
next week, next Sunday is probably going to be the deadline.
All righty.
What kind
When
of
is
material
fall
are you looking for,
accessibility?
Max?
Oh, just whatever.
You
Like you were just saying, if it doesn't get reported, it doesn't exist. All this stuff that doesn't seem to exist because it's not being reported on. No, I don't know anything.
or even that you're
Honestly.
running for county commissioner, wouldn't you put that in there?
Yeah, that's what I was
That
thinking.
that
You need an
Lori's running.
ad or whatever. Like it's kind of a free for all right now. I've suggested donation $20 per ad if there's an ad, but anything that you have for content that's not an ad is totally welcome. Free
Okay, 20 bucks
free
for
of
an
any
ad. I can
suggestions.
do that.
But yeah, if somebody needs an ad, I was thinking I need to put that out there more but I figure I should run a better look. Wait till I get like a track record going of putting out these things before I start really charging for ads. So it's a suggested donation,
Oh, I like that.
and I'm
All
gonna
right.
try to market it more soon.
Anybody have anything else before we go? All right.
Super
Thank you very
productive.
much.
Yep, thank you.
Thank you, Miss Betsy, and everybody
Yes.
here. Take care,
Yes.
John.